The Survivors is brought to you by our friends at Schoser Talent and Wellness Solutions. This podcast mentions suicide, mental illness, grief, and loss, and may be triggering for some listeners. So please take care of your mental well-being by pausing or skipping any sections that feel uncomfortable to you. And if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 for support.
Well, isn't that a pleasure to have you do an actual real live professional countdown? Nobody heard it. I was the only one that heard it and saw it, but that was a pretty professional countdown that you did. That was exciting.
Because, well, you don't want me to have it on the screen anymore.
Yeah, that's okay. So we're here again. I love that we just keep coming back because there is a lifetime's worth of stuff to talk about. Oh, wow. My pink lipstick is that is a pink lip gloss. Do you think?
Pink. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't see it if this is the audio version.
It's glossy.
It's very glossy. Yeah. I feel very bougie right now. So, hey, G.
Hey, girl.
So this week, we're going to go deep in a different way and talk about the emotional toll on suicide loss survivors. And as someone who has lost 3 people that I love to suicide over the course of my life, so it's been a constant thing, constant type of grief, I can promise you that it's not like all the other kinds of grief. I'm not saying anything is better or worse, because grief is grief and there's nothing good about grief, except that it means we loved our person. But it's hard. Grieving is incredibly draining, and especially suicide grief, which I'm glad that we're having this conversation to talk about what makes it so unique. I know you have lost people that you love to suicide as well. So you know that kind of grief personally, firsthand. And I just think it's important that we explore that emotional and psychological aftermath, because it's an aftermath, because you are blown to bits. I know I was. And it takes a lot to pick up those pieces.
Like a lot of it for me, it was the blame game. It's like, why didn't I see the signs? Why didn't they open up? Why are we just finding out about this now? For me, that was the hardest part.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And when you kind of isolate grief, generalized grief, like someone has lost a grandparent because they were 94 years old and they drifted away, or someone, God forbid, had cancer, or someone was killed in an accident. Those are all deep, tragic, sad losses. We grieve them, we mourn them. They don't have some of the things attached to them, though, that suicide has. And I think it's important to name those, like, as we move into this conversation. I think it's important that we just like call those things out right now. So when I say that suicide is very nuanced, it's nuanced because there is guilt that can often be attached. What didn't I see? What signs did I miss? Why didn't I help sooner? Those things are not generally present when someone dies of a heart attack or someone dies of natural causes in another way. There's anger, deep anger in a lot of cases for the people who are left behind. Like, why did you leave me behind? Like, my mother could have been furious. My father took his life when my mother was 40 years old with a 10-year-old child. My mom worked part-time, and he was literally there one day, took his life and was gone, and left my mother with a whole life to manage. She was the breadwinner. She was my support system. She was raising a child alone. It would not have been unusual for my mother to have been furious. In my mom's case, she never was, but a lot of people are. There is crazy confusion. I know when we found out one of our closest friends took his life just a little over 4 years ago, he was one of the people who you never see the signs. Like, you never had any idea. Like my dad, you didn't know anything was wrong. And I had a friend, one of my best friends in the world, called me up and said, "Is it true that our friend took his life?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? Who? Which friend?" Like, I didn't even know what he was talking about. It's your brain is just Nothing computes. And then, like you already talked about, there's shame. It can be so shameful.
And the stigma too, because when you go to try and tell people that your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, or friend, that how they died, like, people just clam up. They don't know how to talk about suicide. Yes, I lost my father to suicide. Yes, I lost my mother to suicide. In my case, I lost a cousin to suicide. I also lost a classmate to suicide. I lost a coworker to suicide. But talking about it, there's still stigma around it. People don't want you to talk about it. Listen, people take their lives every day. Every day.
We've talked about the statistic. You know how I feel about this one particular statistic that I've mentioned in at least one episode, maybe more. But if you haven't heard me say it, I'll say it again. Over 700,000 people a year take their life in this world. And for every one human who takes their own life, it's been determined through all of the major organizations, all statistically, that for every one person who dies by suicide, 135 people are affected by that loss. And those people may include spouse, partner, family, children, coworkers, friends. And that's the average. So you know the number goes up and down. But it's 135 people on average are impacted for every one suicide. And yet, like you said, suicide is one of those things. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to confront it. Nobody wants to be affected by it. And yet, if you add those two numbers together of how many people die by suicide and how many people are affected, that's like 94 million people a year are stuck in a place of feeling all these feelings about something that happened and no one's talking about it.
And society is not doing us any favors. Every time we don't talk about it, it adds to the stigma. It adds to the pain. And we need to keep talking about it. And we need to realize that there is a true emotional toll for the survivor. And as you said, it's different than somebody that gets killed in a car accident, somebody that dies by cancer, somebody that dies by natural causes. It is different. You are left with so many questions in your head that sometimes you don't know how to articulate, or you're afraid to articulate because of how somebody might perceive that. Because
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the minute you say the word suicide, people are like, "Oh, I can't talk about that. Gotta go."
And look, we live in a culture that has created that stereotype. It unfairly stigmatizes the act of someone dying by suicide. So this is how we're all hardwired. It's not because we've all chosen to feel this way. It's because society made us feel this way. It's because only recently the mental health community as a whole was talking about it being okay to not be okay, and that we have resources and things are in the mainstream now. But for the better part of history, it's never been that way. And you want to know something interesting? And I'm not sure I ever mentioned this last season. I know I haven't mentioned it this season so far. So I started back into therapy. I was in therapy when I was probably 21, 22. It was at that time I took a gap year. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I went to a therapist. I talked about my dad, but not in the context of suicide, because if you've never heard my story, I didn't know that my father took his life for 35 years. So when I was in therapy back in the day, it was just because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I'm back in therapy as of a few years ago, mainly to talk about my dad and all the baggage there with his suicide. Do you know that, and this may seem so dumb for people listening, I never realized that I was a trauma survivor until my therapist reminded me that I was a trauma survivor. And I can tell you that it took me by such surprise. Don't ask me why. She said, you're a trauma survivor just because you lost your dad as a child, which of course I never saw that. I never knew that. And then she said, when you found out your dad took his life, you are a full-on trauma survivor. I didn't know that. that's what suicide makes us when we are a survivor of that kind of loss. It also leads to PTSD. I don't know about you, but it leads to PTSD. It leads to anxiety. It leads to depression. People withdraw. It leads to isolation. There is a big psychological impact to this subject that you and I talk about every week. And that's why it's so important that we talk about it every week.
And I think of husband and wife teams where either the husband has taken his life or the wife. Their whole social circle was built around that marriage. And then having people asking, the spouse that survived, how did you not see the signs? Like, don't ask those questions. Like, we're already grieving. Why couldn't you get him into therapy? Okay, if you were anybody like I was, we mask up. We don't let on that anything is going on. Be kind. It's a grief that you can't get over because you're already beating yourself up, and then you have your social group beating you up. You may not realize that you're doing it, but you're beating them up.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very important point. I remember being a little kid, I was raised by a single mom from the time I was 10 years old. And I remember when my mom was encouraged to go to this group. God, the funny things that you remember. There was this group at the local community center, and it was called Alone by Choice or Chance. So it was people who were widowed or people who were divorced. And I don't know, my mom's friends encouraged her to go. And she was trying to just meet people. And I remember just that being like the only thing that she was doing socially was going to that group, because people just, they treat you differently even when they don't mean to treat you differently. You don't get the invitations to do the things that you maybe did with your couple friends, and your life and your circle gets very, very small. And my mother has always been incredibly outgoing, very social. Everything was always at our house, all the holidays and events and milestones.
What if your business could recruit smarter, onboard faster, and support employee wellness all at once? Welcome to Schoser Talent and Wellness Solutions, where people-first strategy meets real results. With over 45 years of combined experience and 16 years specializing in UKG Recruiting and Onboarding systems, we help small and mid-sized businesses thrive. From the first application to full integration, we streamline your hiring process, reduce time to hire, and deliver seamless onboarding experiences. Our proprietary tools like the Recruiting and Onboarding Health Check and the Employee Mental Wellness Index turn insight into impact. At Schoser, we know that businesses are built on people. That's why we integrate wellness into every solution, promoting mental health, reducing burnout, and creating a culture where talent stays and thrives. Whether you're navigating change, implementing tech, or engaging your team, we tailor every solution to fit your goals. Visit schosersolutions.com today. Let's build a healthier, more productive future, one workplace at a time.
But I do remember that they had their couple friends that they socialized with, and that just, it's sad. It just kind of faded away. And I think a lot of it's because people just don't know how to handle it.
And my take on that is like handle the death of someone by suicide the same way you would handle any other type of death. Don't exclude them from your social group because they still need connection. Don't be whispering behind their back. Be present there for them. And it's not a grief that just goes away. It will stick with you for the rest of your life. I still have questions like, why didn't I see the signs? Like, why didn't they why didn't they speak up? I know now from my own personal experience why. But I don't know, just don't be a dick, okay? Because
That's a good one.
I'm sorry, but like that's how it is. It's like, just don't be a dick to them. Like, they are grieving. They lost their person. And when you lose your person, a part of you goes away too. And we're trying to regroup and find the things that we can trust and deal with our own emotions.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm thinking of something that you just said made me think about the position that a lot of people who have survived suicide loss, especially with a partner, especially with a spouse, where you were a unit, you went and did all these things together. I think the thing that people who are engaging with those survivors are thinking is, let's get them out. I mean, in a lot of cases, some people back away. Other people are like, no, let's get them out and make them social and introduce them and fill their calendar. And while that's incredibly kind and thoughtful in a lot of ways, there's a big component of isolation that really kind of in some ways needs to happen when someone loses their partner, because they have now got to redefine themselves. They have an entirely new identity. And you got to give people grace, because if they don't want to go to the event, don't force them to go to the event. Don't put them in a position of having to give you an excuse or a reason or to fight with you. Let them do what they need to do at their own pace. Because let me tell you something. If you're talking about grief from the suicide loss perspective, friends, that is a marathon and not a sprint. Imagine a race that never ever ends, okay? The terrain just changes. That's what grief is, especially grief attached to suicide loss. Because let me tell you something, there are always things in this world that you're going to see, that you're going to hear, that you're going to experience, that are going to trigger you. It could be 5 years out, it could be 50 years out, and you're in a pool of your own tears on the bathroom floor. So the key here is be gentle with the people. You've said it. You've already said it today. Be gentle with the people who have lost someone and let them set the pace.
And that doesn't just go for people that were partners. That goes for people that were friends, people that were coworkers. Be kind, because they're already dealing with it on their own terms, and they may not know how to handle it. And if they isolate for a little bit, let them isolate. Maybe that is their way of dealing. But if they do, call, offer an ear, and don't judge. There's no room for judging in the world of suicide. You absolutely have zero idea what's going through somebody's head when they get to that point.
Yeah, that's such an important point to make in any conversation about suicide loss, because people are very quick to judge in life in general, not just with this particular subject, but people judge us for what we drive and where we live and what we wear. And those things are bad enough. When you start throwing your judgment around about someone who has ended their life, well, that is next level douchiness that you just do not want to put out into the world, because there is almost always a reason that does not have anything to do with I wanted to leave my people or I wanted to leave my life. There is a deeper, darker reason. Suicide is the byproduct of depression, which is a byproduct of mental illness. So anybody who's going to make an idiotic comment about someone taking their life, having it be selfish, or why couldn't it be stopped, you don't know unless you know what you're talking about. So don't even make the comments.
So I have 5 things that are going to be helpful to say and 5 things that you should avoid saying. And
Did you get that off the Help Hub?
No, I got it from another place.
Oh, good.
But I'm just going to go ahead and say these, and then we can move on if you're okay with that.
I'm okay with anything you do.
Okay, so here's some helpful things you can say. I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. I can't imagine what you're going through, but I care deeply. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm just here to sit with you. Fourth is it's okay to feel angry, confused, numb, or all of it, and you're not alone. So those are like 5 things you can say. All right. Now, these are the ones that you shouldn't say because it's total dick move on your part. They're in a better place. Okay, that can really invalidate somebody's feelings. Don't say that.
That one hurts.
At least they're not suffering anymore. Everything happens for a reason.
Ugh.
Did you see it coming? Were there signs? Okay, I'm going to tell you, in my case, no and no. And like, why would you even say that?
But people do.
But people do. You've got to be strong. Okay, grievers should not feel pressured to perform strength. Okay, they went through something very, very, very difficult. Be kind.
Be compassionate. Be understanding. Be non-judgmental. That's what is helpful. Those were incredibly helpful. I live all these things. This is my world. This is your world. I couldn't have said it any better than you just said it. And that was, I think, such a powerful takeaway that people can actually have. It's so important. This is one of the things you and I try so hard to do in every episode. We try to have the conversation. We try to put the topic out there in the mainstream, but we're also trying really hard to give you takeaways. So if you're now in a situation where someone you know has lost someone, maybe you'll rewind your brain a little bit back to this conversation and remember a couple of the things G said to say and not to say, and that will be helpful. So yay for you doing that, because that was just so powerful.
Okay, can I give 4 ways that you can just show up for people?
Yes.
Okay, so there's 4 ways you can just show up. Just be there. You know, grief needs a witness, not fixes. Just be there. Offer specific help. Don't say, hey, if you need anything, let me know. Instead, try, I'm headed to the store. Can I grab you some groceries? Would it help if I walked your dog this week? Do things like that. Respect their grief. Not everybody wants to talk about it right away. Let them guide that pace. And remember the person they lost. Say their name. You can say things like, hey, I saw some sunflowers today and I thought of her smile. Or I remember the time he made us all laugh until we cried. Say their name. Just because they took their life by suicide doesn't mean you can't still say their name.
It doesn't invalidate that life.
Yes.
It's like how we shouldn't judge people by their worst mistake. We also shouldn't judge people by how their life ended in the same way, you know?
And just stay curious, but not intrusive. Find out what they need. Offer love. Don't pressure them to answer questions that they may not be prepared or ever want to answer. And listen more than you speak. Hold space.
You know, it's a very, very gracious thing to just come right out and ask someone who's lost someone, whether it's to suicide or to anything. Ask that person, hey, would it help or would it hurt to talk about your person right now?
Yes.
Just that simple. And I know in my case, and we talked about this in the last episode where you and I were bawling our eyes out about how a friend of mine on Father's Day shouted out a post to my father specifically. And not many people in the world are left who knew my father personally, and he is someone who did. And that was the greatest gift in the world, to have my father be recognized in that way. And I know a lot of people feel that way. So it's always going to be a no harm, no foul situation when you just ask if that's cool or not cool.
Yeah. And, just be present and be human.
Yeah. Yeah. And one last thing before we kind of wrap this conversation is that we've talked a lot about ways in which we can have the hard conversations, how to show up for your people. If you don't have someone in your life, if you don't have a community or a partner or a family or a support system, you're still never alone. There are always hotlines. The one that comes to mind that we talk about in every episode that we record is, of course, the 988 crisis suicide hotline. That is not just for people who are feeling suicidal. That is for anyone who is experiencing any kind of mental stress, strain, anxiety, homelessness, abuse, loneliness, you name it, anything goes to call 988. You do not have to be suicidal. But there are support groups. If you don't have your own personal support group, they're virtual. I know I personally moderate a group the first and the third Wednesday of every month through Samaritan South Coast here in Boston called Safe Place. And we can put that in the show notes. It is a very specific kind of group. It's for survivors of suicide loss, and I moderate that. And that's a virtual group. There are plenty of in-person groups. Seek out a trauma-informed therapist. That is a big deal. When you're talking about a therapist who understands trauma versus one who doesn't, that is a game changer in terms of the kind of conversations you're going to have. And also storytelling. Just the act of being in places where you can share your story. Maybe it's over social media. Maybe it's in a group. Maybe it's over the phone. Maybe it's journaling. There are a million different ways that you can do that to help you process your loss. Do that. Seek those things out, or seek out a friend that you know has lost someone. If you have someone like that in your life, to have that kind of a connection with, because it's a next level conversation when you know that you're talking to somebody who has experienced the same thing that you've experienced. And I think the bottom line to all of this is that connection helps us feel less alone, and it helps us to heal. It's as simple as that. Grieving at all sucks. Grieving after suicide sucks. It's messy. It's traumatic, but we can still heal from it. And we do that when we stop healing by ourselves, and we reach out to the places and the people around us who are there.
And life is short. So make those conversations matter, not just for you, but for the person who's truly grieving. Approach it with kindness and hold space.
That's all we've got. And I hope it's enough. But we'll be back. I guarantee it. We'll be back next week to do it all over again.
We sure will. I love you, Boo.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on The Survivors. Remember, no matter how tough things feel, you are enough, and the world needs you just the way you are. You're not alone in this journey. There's a community here, and every step forward counts. We're so grateful you took the time to listen, and we hope you'll take one day at a time. Just know there's always more light ahead.
Thanks for being here, friends. Just remember, help is out there in so many different places. So if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 and a trained crisis counselor like me will be there to help. You can also find an inclusive and comprehensive directory of mental health resources, tools, and content at thehelphub.co. Just remember that help is always just a call or a click away. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime, keep surviving.